Cassidy received some really key buffs in this last patch that have made him actually a really viable character right now. He's appearing a lot more in ranked, even at the very high level in top 500, definitely at the lower levels, and he can actually do a ton of damage. He's a really strong climbing character. He definitely requires a lot of mechanics, but he has sort of crutches built in between his nade and his high noon that allow for you to actually still pop off even if you don't have a ton of aim. So today we're going to go over some Cassidy so I can show you guys how to carry in your games and how I carry in my top 500 games. There is no better way to improve your game than by checking out GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides all finely crafted from some of the best coaches in the game, with multiple new ones coming every single week that are designed to help you lock in and start climbing. Just follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today. Okay, so getting right into it, the first thing that we're going to talk about with Cassidy is positioning. Cassidy is a very positioning intensive character. You have to be able to actually push and sort of swing out around corners to chase your targets, but you also need to not be so far you're going to get caught out and die. The best way to avoid dying and know exactly when you're able to sort of push and take those close to mid-range fights more often is based off of what cooldowns the enemy tank has. For example, if you're playing against a Winston and you saw him use his jump to get out, you know that he's not going to be able to easily sort of dive you and section you off from your team and get a kill on you, so you can play more aggressively. Or if you see that the enemy Reinhardt's shield is really cracked, you know that he's going to have to start backing off and get to a corner in order to recharge it, and he's not going to be able to block as much of your damage. So you can start getting more aggressive then, and you know he won't be able to really do much against you. So that is by far the most important piece of the positioning, but it's still only one piece, because the next thing you need to be paying attention for is your own tank's positioning. In the same way that you have to be cautious with the enemy tank's cooldowns and the way he can sort of pressure you out when you want to go for a play, the enemy DPSs have to treat your tank the same way. So if you see that your tank is sort of backed off and is starting to recharge his health, you know that once you get aggressive, the enemy DPSs have nothing else to shoot at or focus on besides you. And Cassidy is really easy to hit. He has a very clear model, his strafing isn't too weird, and he's very thick, so he's not that hard of a target for enemies to actually hit. So you need that tank pressure in order to stay alive. And of course, as with most hit scans, the final piece of the puzzle is very important, and that is going to be high grounds. It is very important that you understand the power of high grounds because they generally are going to provide more natural cover, you're going to be harder to push for most of the cast, and you're going to have a very clear sight of what you're shooting at. It can also be a bit of a trap though, especially if you're playing against a sniper like a Widowmaker or a Hanzo, because they'll just be able to one-shot you anyway, no matter if you're above them, below them, to the side, it doesn't matter. So in that case, you want to play closer to your tank. All in all though, if you use those three tips and those three fundamentals, you're not going to really have that much issue with positioning on Cassidy until you get greedy. The next thing we're going to get into about Cassidy is his mechanics. Cassidy is very much a dueling kind of 1v1 character, so it's important that you're confident in that kind of a fight environment. That way you're able to take those fights and you're able to go and push those angles without having any sort of concern. And oddly enough, I'd say the best way to practice Cassidy is not going to be aim trainers. It's actually a very, very simple thing to do. I think by far the best way to practice Cassidy is to go into the custom game browser and look up tryhard FFA lobbies. Now, these lobbies are not a new thing to Overwatch, and they're always going to have a lot of varying skill level. However, for a long time, these lobbies have been used by some of the top players in the game to hone their skills, and practicing against them in that environment will do nothing but good for you. You'll get more and more comfortable playing against good players, you'll actually improve at a much higher rate, and when you go into your ranked game, it'll be like taking the training wheels off, because you're going to play against someone who's likely way worse than the people that are stomping those lobbies. You'll also be able to play against a lot of different DPSs. You'll be able to play against the harder to hit ones, especially because most of these lobbies are sort of populated with those dueling characters like Genji, Tracer, and Cassidy and Soldier. So definitely make sure that whether you're in queue and waiting for a game to pop, or you're just going out of your way to practice for a little bit, you are incorporating some free-for-all deathmatch into your routine for Cassidy. For this next bit, we're going to talk a little bit about playing into your counters on Cassidy. First off, let's talk about the obvious and most oppressive ones, snipers, whether that's Widow, Hanzo, or Ashe. The important thing to remember about fighting these characters is whoever is closest to a corner has more control over it. It is really important for you to know this, because the only way that you're going to end up actually beating a sniper most of the time who's on equal skill level as you is by knowing how to use natural cover to your advantage. You want to get close to a corner for two reasons. One, you want to have as little damage fall off as possible when you're shooting at the sniper because they have farther range than you. And 2, it gives you more power with your movement. When you're close to a corner, you can sort of strafe out much quicker, so the enemy has to be very reactionary to what you're doing. So for example, when you're close to a corner, you can just jiggle peek a little bit just to see if you can bait out a shot without actually committing around the corner, and then you can swing out when you know they have to charge their next one. That's for Widow or Hanzo. One thing you want to make sure you're not doing is falling into the trap of peaking in rhythm with your fire rate. A lot of players, especially good ones, have Cassidy's fire rate sort of memorized, so as soon as they realize, oh, he's just peeking every time he's ready to fire a shot, they'll just end up pre-firing you when they think you're about to go for your next shot, and then you'll end up dying. So make it a little bit random, throw in some bait peeks, you know, don't go all the way, just jiggle peek, make sure you're not doing it just in tandem with your shots every time. And also sometimes in the game, don't be afraid to just push straight at them and try to go for the 2-tap. This will add a little bit of randomness and it'll make them a little bit more worried when they don't know exactly what you're going to do fight to fight. That is by far the best way to beat the snipers, and honestly there's not much else that I feel really counters Cassidy. Most characters in the game are going to be a skill matchup, so just make sure you're practicing those tryhard FFA lobbies and actually getting your Cassidy mechanics up to snuff. The last section I'm going to go over here are just some very quick tips that I can rattle off for Cassidy that have helped me a ton throughout my time playing him in ranked. They don't require all that much. You just need to make a point of actually remembering them because they're not really something you practice. They're just something you know and think of doing in the moment. The first thing I see a lot of people forget about right away is Cassidy's roll damage reduction. When you are mid-roll on Cassidy, you take 50% reduced damage, and this is actually important for a few different interactions. With a little bit of timing, you can survive things like Tracer's Pulse Bomb or a Nanoblading Genji Swing. Both of these are really great examples of things that are very clear when you take the damage. You just have to remember, right before that happens, I should start my roll, and you'll survive them. Just be careful with the pulse bomb trick. You don't end up rolling into your teammates, and especially not your supports, or else you won't get healed for the rest of the game. Another really big thing I see a lot of Cassidys don't do is actually syncing up your primary fire damage with your grenade damage. It can be really tempting to just continue to fire at an enemy as they're stuck with your grenade to try to get their health down, but this is actually not the best way to kill a lot of 200 HP targets. The risk associated with this is that every time you shoot them, they're going to end up getting healed by their supports, and this is going to end up being a situation where your grenade might actually not kill them. The best way to kill enemies that are getting pocketed by their supports is to stick them with your grenade and shoot them just before it detonates. That way the damage is synced up and you don't give the enemy support any time to actually heal them. My third tip is don't underutilize Fan the Hammer. It's actually mainly good for dealing with tanks right now. The steady damage output, especially if you throw a roll and another Fan the Hammer in, is really good against shields, and you can break Sigma Shield and Rhine Shield pretty quickly for your team and actually be a source of spam damage. So if they have a shield tank, don't always go on flank. Sometimes you just want to play next to your team and Fan the Hammer until that shield breaks. My final quick and easy tip is make sure you're communicating when you want to use your High Noon. I see way too many Cassidys at the lower levels think that the only way they're going to get any value out of their High Noon is by going on a flank and just trying to catch the enemy off guard. The problem is that this is only going to work maybe 1 in every 8 times, and a lot of those times you're just going to end up dead in the enemy backline. I would say that I'd take a Lucio amped High Noon over a flank High Noon pretty much any day of the week. They have a much higher success rate because you can actually chase enemies around corners and you can still get a ton of value. And it doesn't just have to be a Lucio helping you. You can get helps from Rhines, from Annas, from, you know, an Immortality Field. You can get help from anything really. Just make sure you know what resources your team has to actually give you and call for them. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more educational news and guide content, and I will see you all again very soon. Take care and peace. There is no better way to improve your game than by checking out GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides all finely crafted from some of the best coaches in the game, with multiple new ones coming every single week that are designed to help you lock in and start climbing. Just follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today.